Good evening and welcome to our webinar. I am Stephen McCulloch, committee member of the Renew Central Sydney branch, and on behalf of the branch committee, welcome you all. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which the Sydney Central branch operates and from where we are at the moment. The Waggle and Cadigal clans of the Aurora Nation. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of the whole nation. For those of you who are new to Renew, just a few words about us. Since 1980, Renew has been inspiring, guiding, and helping people to become more sustainable. We have branches and members all over Australia. We welcome you to become a member, and if you want to know more about the renewable energy sector, how to make your home more sustainable and live in, or you're about looking to renovate or build a new home, or if you're a professional working in the housing industry and want to know more about the practical sustainable solutions, Renew is a source of extensive knowledge and, I would say, inspiration. It is also a great interactive community of like-minded people who thrive and share their experiences. Now to tonight's event. Our presenter is Graham Hunt. Graham was an architect for over 35 years and a NAIDERS thermal performance assessor for well over 24 years. A member of the Australian Building Sustainability Association, ABSA, since its foundation. He undertook Q&A audits for ABSA from 2013 to 2023. Graham has represented the Australian Institute of Architects, AIA, on numerous federal government committees around energy efficiency and thermal comfort ratings. Graham was, until recently, chair of the AIA, National Residential Sustainability Advisory Group. He is also a long-time member of Renew, the local Sydney branch convener, and is currently board secretary. Thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you, Stephen, and welcome everyone. And it's an honour to be here and I guess share some ideas about how renters can save some money, hopefully, and hopefully become a bit more comfortable and save some energy, which might help the planet as well. Everyone knows we have a rental crisis. Affordability and availability is the main issue. But it's also come to light over the last few years that there's also a big issue about the quality of rental properties. And the standard in Australia generally is quite poor, and you can see there's been quite a lot of articles and studies done on how poor this is and the consequences of that on health and well-being. So it's important that often these sort of things get overlooked in regards to there's not enough rental properties, and that's the main issue. But the quality of that housing is crucial, I guess, to how we function as a society. So these are the things we're going to cover. There's quite a bit there. So I hope you're well relaxed and ready to absorb a lot. We're going to talk about how you can work with your landlord because it is a challenge. Renters are often in a position of low power and feel that they can't have any impact. But there are some positive things you can do. We can talk about simple things you can do that give you the most impact. We'll go through equipment and appliances. We'll do a bit of a room-by-room analysis of some critical rooms, such as kitchens and bathrooms. We'll talk briefly about options for solar for tenants. We'll also talk about energy retailers and your bills and how you can make changes there. We'll give you a lot of links of where you can get additional advice and assistance. And we'll talk at the end about the Healthy Homes for Renters campaign, which is a coalition of a lot of different organisational groups, charities, construction industry groups, including Renew, who have launched a campaign to try and ensure that we get standards for rental properties that address energy efficiency. So there is hope because things are changing, and we'll get to that at the end. So working with your landlord, the first thing to do is there is limits around what you can do. So check your lease as to what you can do, things you can change. But it's worth keeping in mind that in New South Wales, a landlord is obliged to provide a property that's fit to live in and is in reasonable repair. So if that's not the case, you're well within your rights to demand changes to make sure that that happens. If you find the property you're in is uncomfortable, overheats or gets too cold, it has mold, it lacks ventilation, it's very useful to document those, measure the temperature, take photos of water leaks, whatever the problem is, and then approach the landlord directly if possible. That may not be possible because most of the time you're dealing with a property manager. But even in that case, if you are submitting a request, it makes sense to ask that the landlord sees that request. But an important thing to keep in mind is to be respectful, and rather than go along and stamp your hand on the desk and demand things, you know, estate agents and landlords are people, and they can tend to be quite reasonable. There was some research done, I think at Monash University, about landlords and renting, and they found that in most instances, if landlords found out that tenants were in discomfort or conditions weren't well, they were willing to improve it. But it's a matter of approaching them sensibly. There's some links at the bottom there. The first one gives you the actual rules of what you can do within a property under the New South Wales government. There's the Tenants Union, which has a whole lot of fact sheets, which can be useful. There's one on negotiating tips with landlords. And there's an organisation, Better Renting, which has done a lot in terms of they've had these renter researchers. So they've been getting renters to document their history in a property in terms of, is it overheating? Is it too uncomfortable? One woman found her son sleeping in the kitchen because the bedroom was just not, you know, too hot to sleep in. So conditions like that should be highlighted. So Renew has produced quite a long time ago a renter's guide to sustainable living, and it was updated a couple of years ago, but it is a really good resource which can be downloaded from our website, and it goes through, these are the simple things that it highlights, and we'll go through each of those in more detail. Draughtproofing, shading and window openings and coverings. Fridges are quite a large energy consumer. Heating systems, and having an efficient shower head is a very simple change that can save you money and water. And insulation is another factor. So looking at those in some more detail, I have to thank Mel Lupus for sharing these with us. They're just some examples of where you commonly get draft leaks through vents, under doors, around skirting boards, wall vents, and also in exhaust fans and so forth. You need to seek approval from your landlord before going around willy-nilly and sealing things up, but there are a lot of things you can do that are removable and you can take away, which won't do any damage. Some of the seals that are shown here can be removed. These are foam seals. You can also get felt seals, which actually last a bit longer and more durable. If you can convince the landlord for you to put in better seals, draft dodgers, which are available from EcoMaster Store, actually fit around the existing door. Because one issue is if you fit the foam seals, you may then have a problem closing the door because it becomes too tight. These are designed to avoid that problem. We mentioned exhaust fans. The draft stopper is a good product that can go on top of exhaust fans. Again, this would involve getting into the roof, so it may not be something you do yourself. But if you highlight it to the landlord that it's a problem, they may be willing to put that in. Removable seals from gaps in the floor. The wall vents, you can even just put a bit of cardboard over it. You know, there can be quite simple solutions. People have used small bits of polystyrene foam cut to fit into, you know, small vents and gaps, and they can easily be taken out. If another common source often is not visible, but behind a kitchen cupboard or in a laundry cupboard where you've got a service penetration plumbing pipe, or a service technician's put a hole through and hasn't sealed around that gap, foam sealant will fill that up. And, you know, landlords probably won't mind because it's probably actually improving things. There's some really good resources there. The CSIRO has a guide, a downloadable guide on draughtproofing. And this company Efficiency Matrix has a whole lot of videos on YouTube. Everything from sealing up wall vents, exhaust fans, and so forth. It's interesting, Melbourne has 3 really good suppliers of these materials: EcoMaster Store, Efficiency Matrix, and EnviroShop. There's nothing similar or equivalent in Sydney, so there's probably a business opportunity out there for someone. Windows can be a source of heat loss and heat gain, especially in summer. There's a range of options here. You can sort of seek to replace them. That's very major, and you would need to get the landlord involved. There's options here of adding films or what's called secondary glazing, which is made from polycarbonate, which can be done without disturbing the existing window. But it's easier probably for renters to add curtains and blinds. Honeycomb blinds are really efficient, and if they're cut well to fit into the window reveal, nice and tight, excuse me, they can sort of act a bit like double glazing. If you have a window that's getting a lot of winter sun, some form of external shading can really help. If you're going to fit external blinds, as shown on the bottom right-hand side there, you will probably need approval from the landlord to do that. But you can do a lot by growing plants in pots. Even a beach umbrella positioned outside a window that overheats can help. There's a product there called Renshade, which is a perforated foil, which you can buy in rolls, and you can cut it to fit and tape around windows that are overheating. And that's quite effective. There's a link at the bottom there, which is for a Renew magazine, which has an article on curtains and blinds and some guidance on those. I believe Doug should be dropping all these links into the chat so you can download them and access them. Insulation, again, can be a bit of a challenge, but it can have a massive impact, especially if there's no insulation in the roof. It will make the house a lot more comfortable. It's not recommended for you to do it yourself. You should be done by a proper installer. There is an Australian standard that it needs to be done to, and there can be issues with electrical wiring. They need to be separated from the insulation, and also around lighting. You can't just put insulation over the top of existing lightings. There can be fire risks. But if you can demonstrate that your house is totally uncomfortable or unbearable in either winter or summer, you have a good case to go to your landlord. And it's worth pointing out that they can claim a tax concession on either repair of existing insulation or depreciation on new insulation. Keeping in mind that a lot of landlords who are mum and dad's investors, they're doing this for the tax advantage. And maintenance is one of those things that they can claim as a tax expense. So don't hesitate to point that out to them, I guess. Hot water is probably going to be one of your biggest energy consumers, especially if you've got an older style electric heater, especially in older apartments. The easiest thing you can do is put in an efficient shower head. They're fairly easy to replace. You might ask for a plumber to do it. You could even offer to buy it if the landlord will let you put it in. It will pay for itself pretty quickly. You can see the image on the right-hand side. This is a pressure relief valve from an electric storage heater. If you have one of these, that loses up to 5% of the heat from the tank. You can buy these insulated cozies which go over them. They cost about $40 online, and that will over time save you a bit of money. It's worth checking the thermostat setting. Hot water tanks only need to operate at a minimum of 60 degrees, and that's to avoid development of Legionnaire's disease. But sometimes you can find they'll be set at 70 degrees and they don't need to be. If it's a gas system, you may find that you can adjust that yourself if you remove the control panel. If it's electric, you may need the plumber to do that. But it's something, if you have a plumber come to site to replace a toilet or do some other work, it's worth asking them just to check the thermostat on the hot water while they're there. If you have a hot water tank that's outside, and often you have a lot of hot water piping from that tank that's running alongside the house, you're going to lose a lot of heat from that piping if it's not insulated. So you can buy insulation and just stick that on yourself. And it can be removable if at the end of the lease, the landlord says he doesn't want it there. One thing to keep in mind, especially when you're first moving into a rental property and you're doing your checklist, is to look at the hot water system and check the condition of it, especially if it's leaking. It's an indication that the tank's rusting out, or if it looks a bit old, make a note of that. Because what happens if it burns out or if it has to be replaced, usually the plumbers just replace like for like. They bring in an old inefficient system. But if you're pointed out that the system is on its last legs, if you do your research, and I'll show you later, there's some rebates available to landlords to replace hot water systems. If you prepare them and explain this is going to make a lot of sense, when it needs to be replaced, there's much higher probability that you will get an efficient system. Heating, especially this time of year, is a crucial thing. It's worth turning down the thermostat if you can. For every degree of temperature you turn down the thermostat, you'll save approximately 10% of the energy. So if you can turn it down a bit and maybe put on a jumper, you will save energy. If you have gas heating, but you also are lucky enough to have reverse cycle air conditioning, often people only use that for cooling in summer. use it for heating in winter. It's a lot more efficient than the gas and probably healthier if it's unflued gas. Zoning can be helpful. Heat the rooms you're living in and close doors. Don't just keep it running all the time. Turn it off when you're away. Wear more clothes. Heat the person, not the room. It can be a simple principle, especially if you don't have fitted heating systems. And cleaning vents of heaters is important, and getting the system serviced. You're quite within your right to ask for equipment like that to be serviced on a regular basis. It goes back to that thing of being in reasonable repair. Because if the vents are blocked, they're just not going to work efficiently. And often they're poorly sealed around them, and you can try and seal around the vents. You can buy, shown in that photo at the bottom there, a director to direct the heat to where you want it if you feel it's going in the wrong area. And you can fit similar things to air conditioners. Similar principles for cooling. I won't go through it too much. You can adjust the thermostat up, although it says down, that's an error. But, you know, rather than having it sitting at 22 degrees, if you can tolerate it being slightly warmer, you'll lose much less energy. And especially if you can use a ceiling fan at the same time, it helps pump the cool air from the air conditioner around the room. Again, zoning is helpful. Ventilation can be really good in summer, especially if you don't have cooling fitted. And if you're in an older brick building, opening the windows and doors at night, so especially when the outside temperature has dropped lower than the inside temperature, the cooler air will come through and take heat out of the building. If you can't open your windows, that's an issue, and you have a right to fresh air. So that's something to raise with your landlord. It may even result in them having to replace windows, and that's an opportunity to get a better quality window. The trouble is, if you get an opening window, you may then get mozzies, so you might need fly screens. But if the landlord's unwilling to put in fly screens, you can fit them yourself. There's magnetic or Velcro types which are removable, and you can take them away with you. Again, an AC system should be serviced every 2 years to clean vents and make sure it doesn't need regassing. And I imagine there's a lot of systems out there that have probably even never been serviced. And they can be virtually useless. So there's no problem. Feel confident to ask for this sort of things to be done. Lighting can also save energy. Simple thing is turn it off when you leave the room. And during the day, open the curtains and blinds rather than using your desk light. If you have old halogen or compact fluorescent, which are the spiral ones, it makes sense to replace them with LED globes, which are now readily available. They'll use probably a quarter or less of the power. If you're actually replacing the downlights, it's important to make sure that they're the sealed variety or IC rated. That means they won't let heat up through the light, and it means insulation can be put on the top of them as well, or up to them. Portable appliances, again, a simple one, turn them off at the power point if you're not using them. Also, just to stop the standby power. If you've got a bank of, if you're working at home and you've got a printer, a computer, a monitor, if they're all on the one power board, all you have to do is switch off the power board. You don't have to pull out all the plugs. You can actually, or used to be able to get power boards with remotes, but I don't think you can anymore. But simple things like that. When you're buying newer appliances, even if your landlord's replacing an appliance such as a dishwasher or washing machine or whatever, ask that they buy an efficient one. It may not necessarily cost them any more, but it will save you money. And the same, make it efficient in water. The wells rating, they're often the same price. Steer clear of monster-sized TVs, and LED TVs are much more efficient. TVs have become a lot more efficient in the last 10 years. It may be you have a really old TV and, it might make sense to replace it. The Energy Star rating on the bottom here is important mainly for electronic equipment, because what it means is that that equipment has a low standby energy use in standby mode. So if you're leaving things on overnight, that will use much less energy. It may not seem like much, but standby power, if you're leaving a lot of things on, can add up to about 5, even up to 10% of your energy bill. So become a bit of a power switch Nazi at home and keep switching everything off. Kitchens, a lot happens in the kitchen. There's a lot of cooking, appliances, energy use. Fridges can waste a lot of energy, especially if they're old. Simple things, don't open it, don't keep going back and forth all the time. It can be useful to keep it full. If you don't have a lot of food, you can do it simply by filling bottles of water, soft drink bottles. And what that does is when you open the fridge, you're not losing all that cool air. It's being retained by the storage. But don't overload it. If a fridge is too full, it still needs air to circulate inside it for it to be effective. So there's a balance there. There's a link there to a very good article in the Fifth Estate about fridges, which even goes into food wastage and how we're inefficient in how we use our fridges and how we purchase food. Do you really need that second fridge or freezer? Often people like to store a lot of food, but the cost of that storage can become quite significant, and it may be more cost effective to shop more regularly, especially if they're old fridges. If you have especially like the beer fridge out in the garage where it gets hot, if that's running all the time, just keeping half a dozen bottles of beer cool, that's costing you a lot of money. It's more efficient to buy a bigger, more efficient fridge. Older fridges, check the fridge temperature. The fridge cabinet should be around 4 degrees C and the freezer about -18. You can get thermostats to check that. The other thing is to check the seals. A simple test for fridge seals is to get a banknote, put it in the door, close the door, and if you can pull the banknote out easily, it means the seal's not gripping enough. Seals are also renowned for attracting mold as well, so they can become unhealthy. You can get people who will come around and replace your fridge seals, but it also may be time to consider replacing it. Fridges primarily are trying to get rid of heat. That's how they work. They're keeping things cold. So if you put them into a tight space that has no air movement, that makes it really hard. So ideally, you try and get 5 centimeters around the fridge on either side. That may be difficult because you just allocated a certain space. But if you're getting a new fridge, it's worth considering that. And the size of a fridge, you can save energy. The energy rating label I showed before, you could have 2 fridges that are both 4 stars, say, but one could be twice as big as the other, and it will use a lot more energy. And you can see the label there, the amount of kilowatt hours. It's worth looking at that. You could have a 4-star fridge that might be using half as much energy because it's much smaller. But it may just mean you changing your habits about how you buy food and store food. Simple thing of only filling the kettle with what you need. If you're making 1 cup of coffee, you don't have to fill the whole thing up. And what's become available recently, I saw this in Aldi, is portable. That was, I think, $49. Portable induction cooktops. If you've got a gas cooktop, a lot of people are trying to get away from gas. Gas is not healthy with the cooking. This is a simple way to avoid that. They just plug into a normal power plug, and they're quite effective. Moving on to the bathroom, shorter. If you can't replace the shower head, try shorter showers, putting in a timer. I've shown one here on the right, which actually plumbs in, and you can set the timing and then the water stops. So that gets the people out of the shower pretty quickly. Check the flow rate of your existing shower head. A simple way to do that, ideally it should be 6 to 7 or 8 litres per minute. Get a 10-litre bucket, put it underneath and time how long it takes to fill it up, and that'll give you an idea. If you've got leaking taps, especially if they're hot water, that's costing you money because your hot water's running out. So you've got the right to ask for them to be replaced. And if they are going to be replaced, suggest that they put in an efficient one. It shouldn't cost them any more. There's a huge range of them available now. Bathrooms are notorious for mold. It's a big issue. I won't get distracted with that. But if you have mold, you're quite within your rights to ask the landlord to do something about it. There is a link at the end, which is give you some good advice on how to deal with that. There is also the talk we had last month with Sean Maxwell, which is now on our YouTube channel, which gives a lot of good pointers about dealing with mold and condensation. And again, as mentioned earlier, unsealed exhaust fans can lead to a lot of heat loss out of bathrooms. Now, coming on now to energy retailers, and this is where you sign up and pick a bill or pick a supplier. It's always a minefield. It's like trying to get a good mobile plan. You know, it's a nightmare, and they don't make it easy for you. But there is some assistance. There's a government comparison website where you can go in, put in your postcode, and you also put in your NMI, which is your national meter identifier, which is on your bill. And they actually match the plans to your usage. So it's quite a smart tool. And you can use that to see if you can get a better plan than the one you're on. Greenpeace have one which combines or compares all the suppliers in terms of their green credentials, of how much renewable energy they're supplying and what their solar feed-in tariffs are. So if you're wanting to lower your footprint, it's worth checking that out as well. And I was reminded just before we started, the Inner West Council is having a workshop on Tuesday at 5:30 at their sustainability hub. And that could be very useful for you, so you can understand your bills, especially if you're looking to change your retailer. You might find that very useful. But like most things, do your research about what, sorry, I'll go back one. Hello. And challenge what you were told. Often, unfortunately, you're talking to salespeople and they probably don't understand, or they're wanting to sell you the most expensive option. But just threaten to leave or go somewhere else, and you may find that they'll be keen to keep you. If you can eliminate gas, then you may be able to get your meter plugged and avoid your gas bill, but there may be a bit involved in doing that. Renew has a getting off gas toolkit. There's a link at the end. And if you want to go down that path, that's a very good resource. Solar for tenants. I guess it's one thing that makes renting a bit more inequitable is that a lot of homeowners have been able to put in solar, and that's helped reduce their energy use and reduce their bills. It's not so easy for renters, but keep in mind that some landlords may be agreeable because it adds value to their property, especially if they've done it themselves. They'll realise that. It may require some sharing of costs. Renew has a few articles that covers that, and our Sustainable Living Guide for Renters does talk about that and options you can consider. One can be that you pay the landlord your solar use and what you pay the concession you get for the feed-in tariffs that they get paid. There have been numerous attempts to set up payment schemes. There was one set up in Sydney, but I don't think that's functioning anymore, unfortunately. If you can't convince your landlord and you want to lower your footprint, one option that's available to renters is what are called solar gardens or some community energy proposals where you can buy a share in a solar farm which is remote from where you are, but they'll commit to supply into the grid an equivalent amount of power as renewable energy to what you use at home. So that can be an option. And make landlord aware of any rebates that are available. There's not so many in New South Wales at the moment. There is a rebate currently for batteries to add on to a solar system, but that may be a changing space. So there are lots of options where you can get assistance. So the New South Wales government has an energy saving scheme, and that's where landlords or people who own the property can get a rebate on upgrading air conditioners, hot waters, and even lighting upgrades, and the battery incentive rebate that I've mentioned. So all the links are there. Go and look it out. It may not always be applicable. There are conditions. But if you let your landlord or property manager know that this is an option, even if it may not use it on your property, at least if they're aware of it, they may use it elsewhere. But it will significantly reduce the cost of doing a replacement, and it may be enough to tilt them to actually agree to doing it. There's a lot of useful resources. Your Home is a federal government resource that gives you lots of information about sustainable building, including selecting properties. So if you're wanting to rent a property, it'll give you guides as to what's going to be a more energy efficient, better performing property. The New South Wales government has some useful information there for households. There is a useful federal government website here, energy.gov.au rebates, which lists all the rebates that are available throughout the country in all the states and territories. So you can go through that and you can put in the type of rebate you're looking for and where you are, and it'll give you all the rebates that may apply. And go armed with that to your property manager or to your landlord and say, hey, look at this. If you want to get more detailed advice about how your rental property is performing, you can get a Residential Efficiency Scorecard done. That's where an assessor comes in and looks at your property. You'll have to pay a fee for that, but that will give you some clear advice and information that you can give to your landlord. There's My Efficient Electric Home, which is a very popular Facebook page, which has lots of great tips on energy efficiency. There's a Facebook page of Sydney Renters, which is a group where you can join and you can share your experiences on renting, not only about energy efficiency, about the whole gamut. Livability is an interesting one. It was set up by the real estate industry to promote better understanding of some sustainability amongst real estate agents. So you can go on there and you can find which real estate agents understand this stuff, and they may be the best ones to rent a property through. The Tenants organisation, as I mentioned, has lots of fact sheets, and there's one there on repairs and maintenance. And this is the bottom one on the Fifth Estate. That's the useful article on how to deal with mould. And there's more. Renew also has lots of resources. As I mentioned, we have the Getting Off Gas Toolkit. In 2022, we did a Sustainable Renters Week where we had online webinars, and there's 4 of them there. All very useful, getting your landlord on board, even small space gardening. If you've only got a balcony or a small backyard, things that you can do there to grow food and whatever. I've already mentioned the Renew's Renter's Guide to Sustainable Living. There's a link to that. There's an article in a Renew magazine, which has just come out. And this is an older one for renters and apartment dwellers on solar and batteries. Give some interesting insights there. So just to close, I wanted to discuss the Healthy Homes for Renters campaign. So it's a national framework for rental properties to improve the standards. That is actually a federal, state and territory government initiative. And only the other week, the energy ministers released the Home Energy Ratings Disclosure Framework. This is going to be a game changer. What this means is that it hasn't fully been determined how it will be implemented, because it will be implemented in different ways in different states and territories. But basically, it'll mean for sale and rent of a property, landlords and owners, sellers will have to declare the energy efficiency. They've had a similar system in place for commercial offices for over 10 years. And they have to get a rating done before they lease a commercial office above a certain area. But this will mean if you're trying to rent a really inefficient property or sell an inefficient property, you won't be as competitive in the market. They've had it in the ACT for a long time, and it's been shown that it has added value to homes that have a higher rating. They perform better in the market. So as part of that, or alongside of that, there's been the Community Sector Blueprint, a national framework for minimum energy efficiency rental requirements. And this is the coalition that Renew's been part of, as well as different tenants unions, Shelter New South Wales, charities like Vinnie's and Uniting Church, ACOS, and a whole group of social groups have got together to say things need to change. And they've set up this blueprint, which has contributed to the pressure on governments to do things. And it's obviously having an impact. And landlords can become part of that conversation. So if you go to the Healthy Homes website, you can sign up and participate in that. Renew, as I mentioned, has been doing a lot of advocacy. So there's a link there to explain what we've been doing and what we're asking for. And just down below is New South Wales government link, which sets out what the minimum standards are for rental property. And it's just noting that it should have adequate natural lighting and ventilation. So what is adequate? But it should, you shouldn't be suffering. We've still got a long way to go in New South Wales, but a lot is happening elsewhere. Victoria has had standards for rental properties more advanced than other states, where heating is required to be fitted, and other requirements around ventilation and windows, but they're being reviewed and they're going to be updated. At the moment, they're likely to bring in things like efficiency around hot water systems, efficiency around heating, not just fitted with a heating, but it's got to be a heater of a certain performance. They're trying to phase out gas as part of this process. So watch that space. In the ACT, they're doing a renters home energy program where they're getting assessors to go into renters home and provide advice. And they have some helpful online tools there. South Australia has an energy retailer productivity scheme that can help you get efficient lighting, shower heads and other upgrades. So there's some links there, and they have an online home energy audit where you can do it yourself and get an idea of how efficient your property is. Queensland did have some home modification energy saving inducements that recently stopped, but they still have a lot of information on that page. And they have a solar bonus scheme of a 44-cent feed-in tariff, which is unheard of in these days, and a battery booster rebate. And a couple of their generators give you a $400 cash back on upgrading your air conditioning. So there's options out there. Maybe we should all move to Queensland, I don't know. So just in summary, you're probably all familiar with Renew, but there's the two magazines we sell and our flagship event, which is Sustainable House Day. I put in there a link to our donation page if you want to support what we're doing in terms of the call for advocacy around improving rental standards, then please, we'd welcome any contribution. Our events are uploaded on our Renew YouTube channel, so we should have up there now the presentation from last month with Sean Maxwell, and anyone who was there would know that was a really great presentation. We also had in May a presentation by our president, Dick Clark, on building resilience, and that is up there now for viewing. So now, if there's any questions, there's no questions from the floor. Yes, we've got one question, Sonia.
Thank you, Graham. My question is about the national framework, one slide forward,
Yeah.
The National Framework for Disclosure of Residential Energy, that was released. What does that mean? Is that consultation in each state? And of many of the things you asked for in the blueprint, did they turn up in the disclosure framework?
Yeah.
Like, were you happy with what you got?
Yeah, it's a framework at this point in time. It's a mechanism for how that will be implemented. A big part of that is setting up NATRs, which is the National Home Energy Rating Scheme, which is normally for new buildings, to be able to be used on existing buildings. So there's a lot of work being done under that, under a scheme called REDI, the Residential Energy Disclosure Initiative. So there's a lot of development work happening there. What's not clear is that because of our federation, all of these things get implemented, like the building regulations, on a state-by-state basis. So it's not clear how the states are going to implement it. This framework means they've all agreed to it in principle. I guess from now on, it's fleshing that out to see what form it's going to take in every state. But it's certainly a path in the right direction. COAG agreed to mandatory disclosure probably 15 years ago. And it's taken this long for actually to get a framework developed. So, you know, we're glad that's happened. But yeah, the devil's in the detail, and that's the next stage. And that's where I think renters need to find their voice. If you look back at that first slide, which I didn't really explain, the graph that showed the blue line is owners without a mortgage. And this is from early 90s through to 2017. The number have been decreasing. Owners with a mortgage have been increasing. These are rented properties have been increasing. And this is 2017. By now, it's probably up to 30%. So 30% of the population is a big voice and a powerful voice, you know, and well, could be. So I think now's the time for the renters to say, you know, let's get standards implemented. Because, you know, a lot of people's wealth is being generated from rental properties. You know, renters are paying people's mortgages, and there's no investment going back into that finance stream. All right, well, with that, I think we'll say good evening to everyone, and thanks for tuning in.